everybody. It's Doormat Mom, and I am back on the Doormat Mom No More podcast, where we talk about everything estrangement, specifically parent-child estrangement. And we talk to some, all different types of guests to sort of dissect it and see where we could help, specifically also, speaking on behalf of parents who have had less of the conversation around them than the estranged adult children. So today I have a returning guest, Peter Anderson. He is a therapist. He's not only, he's a couples therapist and at all. And he's returning because I wanted to talk with him a little bit more about personality disorders. And because I truly believe, and I put out a video at one point where I think there are many families, many parents are actually raising children with personality disorders. But because they don't know how to recognize the signs, they think they're raising like every other child. And that's not the case. And even sometimes, from my own reading, I've learned that it's almost you do the exact opposite of what you should be doing when you're dealing with a child that has a personality disorder. So, so Peter Anderson is with us again, and he's gonna share what he's learned and what he recommends, and with a more of a deep dive even into borderline. So let me bring up his video first, which sparked my interest in going down this road with him. And he's got his cute little dog in this video too. So hang on.
Guys, so I want to talk a little bit about trauma. How you know the difference between somebody that may have a personality disorder and someone that actually has just a normal personality. So again, a normal personality is somebody that has a variety of traits. They have a lot of flexibility. They know how to access those traits pretty easily. A personality disorder often only has one trait only. It's called an excessive trait, and then they also have a deficient trait, a trait that they often can't access. If you wonder what that sound is, that's my dog. That's Millie. So let's talk a little bit about that. Somebody with a personality disorder will often use in their drama narrative, persecutor rescue. I'm just going to keep going, whatever. And the victim part, I want to talk a little bit about the victim part, because in the victim part, they will often use their trauma as a weapon. That's what's really interesting. When I got some EMDR for some personal trauma I won't get into right now, I got a lot better, like really fast. People who have what you would call flexible, normal personalities actually get a lot better when they do a little bit of trauma work. That's great. I don't want to negate that. And that's 80% or 75% of the population. I think it's about 20 to 22% of the population, according to Leicester, McLean Hospital, even though they think personality disorders are somewhat underdiagnosed, so you could probably increase that. It's significantly higher in clinical settings. That population group, they use trauma in a way that weaponizes. So that is why you want to be very, very mindful going down these long rabbit holes, because what they're doing is that because of their neurotic kind of personality trait, because they're often higher in neuroticism, they will stick with that, and then they'll use it, and then they'll weaponize it. So what does that have anything to do with? A lot of the cutoffs that I see and whatnot? Most of the situations that I see, even on my wall, have to do with people that have cut off their parents because of something that happened literally 15, 20 years ago, without recognizing that people evolve, people change. And people will often, a lot of the people, adult children who are continuing to cut off their parents over something that literally happened decades ago, that's a good example of using trauma as a weapon. It has nothing to do with reconciliation. Don't be led astray by that. Don't be manipulated by that. Get a backbone, stand up for yourself, be fair to yourself, be fair to the other person. This DBT would say, don't make unnecessary apologies when you don't need to. Hope that helps. And there's Millie again. I do have a normal life.
So that educated even me. And not that I can't be educated on a lot of other things. That sounded a little narcissistic. Yeah, I definitely needed to understand that, because it's definitely a light bulb went off, and I think a light bulb went off for many parents who just couldn't differentiate. And I think that happens a lot when you're raising children. You just can't differentiate what is normal sometimes versus what is not. So let me bring him on and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Hello.
Hi, good to see you. Hello. I was like, I know, right when I started, I wonder if the only people who watch that video were dog people because that didn't bother them. You know how like you know how like when you first have kids, you get so used to noise, and then you go inside people's homes who have kids, and you're totally fine. Anyway, so it's like one of those. You just kind of learn how to, not pay attention to the background noise.
I've got 4 dogs. I don't even pay attention.
Yeah, you probably didn't even pay attention. That's probably you're one of the few that were able to listen to the whole video, flipping through it. That's good.
It's really funny. No, you know what? Look, it's life. We live lives. We live normal lives, as you said. So
I'm a very normal life person. So yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I can see that. And you're also someone who really has dove into personality disorders and has had training on personality disorders. And I think a lot of therapists have not, as you had mentioned, and certainly parents, most parents don't have any training whatsoever, so they can't recognize it. And so they're dealing with children that do have them. You mentioned, about 20% of the households, probably more. I actually think it's more. I actually think it's my gut instinct, and also what I've seen with parents, strange parents with the stories I've been told. I feel it's more. I really do. But so tell me a little bit about what exactly would a traumatic response be that would indicate that, hey, you did say like something that blaming their parent for something that happened 15 years ago, that now they're cutting the parent off for that. Is that a norm? Is that, would that say to you, well, this is a personality disorder I'm dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, I just read Joel Paris's really, really good book. He's done the most research on borderlines than anybody in the world. So he's also done the most research on personality disorders out of it, and he's still alive. He's 85. He's right up there with John Gunderson, who just died about 5 years ago at Harvard. And I go to those two, Gunderson and Joel Paris. So what Paris saw was a real correlation between people that were high in neuroticism and also people who have personality disorders, which I really thought was very fascinating. And he didn't say that people who are neurotic have personality disorders.
Right.
But what he would say is that most people with PDs, I'm just going to call them PDs from now on, definitely do have that particular characteristic, that trait, I should say. And people who are neurotic, high in neuroticism, they have things that definitely stick to them for a very, very long time. So let's say, for example, even the diagnosis of PTSD, this is Paris's point in his book, The Myths of Trauma. Everybody experiences some trauma, but trauma doesn't necessarily mean you will have a diagnosis of PTSD. Only 10% of people with significant trauma actually develop PTSD. Paris was interested in that group who actually had PTSD. Most of them were actually, you guessed it, high in neuroticism. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone who has a diagnosis of PTSD therefore has a personality disorder, but he did see that they were very much intertwined, because what's hard for a lot of people who are high in neuroticism, they can't, quote, let things go. They perseverate on things for a very, very, very long time. So you take that with somebody that has a PD who has an excessive trait and then a deficient trait, and they don't have the observing ego that a normal personality has, and you have all that combination. That's what makes them very difficult both to treat and also really to raise in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. Let's just go back for a second, right? Can you define neuroticism? Because I know people know it, but I want to actually hear it from you. What is neuroticism? And then can you define trauma? Because trauma today is everything and anything someone says.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's very true. And that's actually Paris's point too. trauma used to mean something that was like, that prevented you from doing your life tasks. You're constantly up all night. You're getting up in the middle of the night, and he would call it concept creep for trauma. Now it basically, for a lot of clinicians, got to the point where it means anything that, quote, makes you uncomfortable. Now that's not that extreme, but in certain cases it is that extreme. I actually heard an EMDR therapist actually say, if you say no to your child, you create trauma. I'm like, who doesn't say no to their child? I mean, are you saying to me that if I say no to my 11, my 12-year-old or a 5-year-old, you can't have a chocolate chip cookie? I just gave her trauma. But neuroticism and trauma is what everybody has elements of it. It's something that could be very difficult to go through. It could be something that change. There is such a thing as adjustment disorder and versus PTSD. Those are two very different diagnoses versus major trauma. But trauma is just like a very significant life transition. That's the way that causes you to really change somewhat of your view of reality. So people whose partners had affairs, for example, John Gottman would say you've created trauma because your person, your secure bond person that you trusted and committed did something that behind your back, and now you have to change your whole framework for that person.
Right.
Which is why when you're in that situation, it's best that you take full atonement if you're the one that had the affair. You don't like blame the partner because that's only going to that's significant so that they can really heal. Neuroticism is a personality trait. It describes someone who is really prone to experience negative emotions. So if you're high in neuroticism, you're going to feel anxious, quite a bit worried. You're very easily stressed. You're going to also experience a lot of mood swings. You also don't have as high of a life expectancy. You're going to have more. Those people, when you do follow-up studies, they actually live much less than people who are lower on neuroticism. You're very sensitive to criticism. You get very upset very easily. Uh, and so people who are lower on neurotic scales, they're going to stay calm under pressure. They're going to recover really quickly from stressors.
Right.
That's why, you take somebody that, say, for example, that has gone through a very traumatic event. If one is high, one is low, the one that's lower is going to get through it a lot easier. And they may not even have those people often don't have the diagnosis of PTSD. And so neuroticism is really about how emotionally reactive or sensitive you are to stress or negative feelings. People with PD, they often have that particular trait with that particular diagnosis.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So borderline. So let's talk about
Yeah.
borderline.
Yeah. Those
Well,
are fun.
how you say, and that's the funny thing, because I just
Uh,
told you off air, but I'm going to say it on air too,
yeah.
that I was after my last video with Peter. I had a ton. I mean, I had at least 10 therapists that came to me and said, you know, you've got to get him on it to tell, to say why it is that he loves to treat borderlines, because I was told if there's a borderline in the room, run the other way, don't treat him because they're untreatable. And so they wanted me to ask you what it is why do you love to treat borderlines, and what are you doing that they don't know about?
Yeah.
Really
And I
odd.
understand that. Yeah. And I actually asked one of my pastors in my church, who was also a therapist. He's much older. I think he's in his 90s. And I had asked him about a borderline that I was seeing at the time. This is way before I got treatment in PDs. And he said the same thing. He's like, run away. So he was taught in that old school model in the 60s and 70s that's still very present in certain grad school programs. I don't want to critique any of that. I believe that too. That they were just basically untreatable. But that's definitely a very archaic position, and I don't say that with judgment. It is what it is. It's kind of that's not true anymore. John Gunderson has done more work, and he's given more treatment with borderlines than anybody in the world, and that's the McLean Hospital. He started the Gunderson Institute primarily because we were getting bipolars and borderlines wrong, and they're not the same, even though they look the same. A
Explain the
bipolar,
difference, by the way. Yeah, explain the difference.
yeah, they look the same in the sense they have mood swings and instability. The difference is that medication for my bipolar patients, they're fine. Medication for borderlines doesn't really do anything.
Okay.
Trauma therapy for my bipolars works really, really well. Trauma therapy for my borderlines doesn't hit. So as you can see, my bipolars have normal personalities traits because they have a variety of traits that they can access.
Right.
Borderlines, they only have one emotional trait of what you would call emotional, I guess you would say, instability, and then they have a deficient trait of proportionality. And that's why they look like borderlines, but they're not the same. So the Gunderson Institute saw, okay, treating these two population groups is actually creating a lot of harm. The bipolars, you get them on good meds. Sometimes they need therapy, sometimes they don't. Usually my bipolars, if they're on their meds, I don't really hear from them.
Mm.
That's not true for my borderlines. And
Mm.
so, but the therapy that ended up really working for borderlines is dialectical behavioral therapy. Works very, very well. Marsha Linehan herself, who's the author of DBT, she had borderline. She went through 7 different hospitalizations. Um, and the one that's really gaining ground that I'm actually getting full training in next week at McLean Hospital is called mentalization based training.
Mm.
MBT for short, and that teaches borderlines to mentalize kind of the other person's perspectives, because personality disorders, you could tell it's a PD when it's an excessive, a deficient, and then there's not that observing ego. When I say observing ego, it's you. I mean, you made a funny comment. Maybe I'm a narcissist, right? I mean, that was cute. That was cute. That's funny though, because a narcissist would never say that. That's how you know the difference between you and somebody that's like a narcissist. That would never even come in their mind that they're being, quote, grandiose. But we're all a little grandiose, right?
Thank
Yeah, I
you.
mean, we all
Thank
are.
you. See, guys,
So,
I knew
yeah.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
That's
No,
proof.
I mean, the observing ego is like the Jiminy Cricket that says, "Okay, Peter, you're talking too much," or "Peter, you're attention seeking." We all have that, or but a borderline, she or he doesn't even realize that they're being completely unstable, or that they never really bring a calm to the situation. And yet
Right.
they keep dramatizing and dramatizing, and they think they do the right thing and they're really not. But
Right.
I will say there's a difference between treatment and management.
Right.
So treatment for borderlines, it's not high. It's about 44% if they get treatment. But once they get treatment, within 4 to 5 years of DBT or MBT, they actually don't show the symptoms anymore. They're back to, quote, normal. Yeah. So it's
Wow.
great. Narcissism is actually the most treatable. It's about 70%. The only 2 personality disorders that are not treatable but they're manageable is antisocial and paranoid. You can't treat those. You could manage them. And so a lot of therapists actually really get into trouble with those 2 population groups,
Interesting.
because they'll say, "Oh no, Johnny just needs therapy." I mean, a lot of laws and very, I should say, cities where they just kind of want to apply therapy to all the criminals,
Right.
their minds, that they don't understand this, and it's terrible because they actually think people that commit rape or murder, let's just put them right back on the street and give them therapy. You're dealing with an antisocial. That person needs prison.
Right.
Okay. And so until we actually find treatment for them, we only need to be managing those people because they're going to end up really harming someone else. But borderlines are, yeah, very treatable once they get help. And I love telling my borderlines that they have borderlines. They're actually the most receptive to it because it like makes sense to them. Oh my gosh, like it's like the scales. I've had people literally just fall and just start crying in my office. Not to sound dramatic, only because it's like for the first time in their lives, it makes sense why they think the way they think, because they're miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I can see that. If you don't understand what's going on with you, and yet it's just
Mm,
going on, and you don't have any help, you don't feel like there's any help. You certainly become very, very, you know, like
mm.
hopeless. You're like in
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
cycle. You're
Yeah.
just spinning in a
Yeah.
cycle, you know?
Sure. 100%.
Um, well, I love the video that you did with regards to, and I'm gonna you called out all your borderlines for assistance in telling the so many estranged adult kids that they're not Jesus Christ per se, and that you may just be borderline. So explain that video and where that was going, because I thought that was beautiful, and I think I see
Yeah.
that in my own comments too.
Yeah, and I can't tell you the number of times that people were like, "Well, why'd you say the Jesus metaphor?" I'm like, "Okay, that was a metaphor. I'm not being." So, yeah, I mean, borderlines, the reason why DBT works so well for them is that it gets them out of but statements, because but
Mhm.
statements, what I mean by that, it gets them out of that black and white world of thinking. They view them, the fundamental pattern of a borderline is love, then hate, love, then hate. The view of others is all about angels or devils. They view the world really just by hurtful. They deal with the world by, okay, the way I deal with the world is I'm going to escalate it. And that's why they come across as highly unstable. And so, I think what you want to do is instead of seeing the adult parent, or excuse me, yeah, the parent as just like Satan incarnate and yourself as Jesus,
Right,
there needs to be a lot more gray. We're all effed up here a little bit,
right,
right? I mean,
right,
we all made mistakes. Everybody has yelled at their kids. Everybody lost their temper, and not all the adult children are necessarily the easiest to raise. And if we could just kind of admit that, it would all be easier to just kind of, have a equal conversation.
right,
Um, I've done the steps of AA. I did. And so I don't mind sharing that. I mean, I know what it's like to, have to reach rock bottom and take amends and to really apologize to people you've really hurt, that you really love. And that's a very humbling place to be. But I'll tell you this, going through the steps, it really made my life a hell of a lot better.
right,
Tapping out and just saying, "Hey, I could really, and that feels wonderful. It feels good for them. It
right.
feels good for me, but that's also why I'm a Christian, for example. Every week I just, confess, and I'm not doing everything. I'm not perfect here. I'm
Right,
getting by just like you're getting by. And that's
right,
just life. That's life. And it's sad. A lot of these adult children want to like hold on to this. Well, I
yeah,
can't let go of the time you did this. I'm like, well, maybe it's time to look at your own shit, and
right,
just like how you're coming across, because a lot of the things, even with the way they come across, even online, it's pretty toxic, pretty
yeah,
um, almost verbally abusive at times,
yeah,
not, to other parents. It's like, my
mhm,
gosh, can you
yeah,
like take the scales off your eyes? I mean, I've had adult children tell mothers that they don't even know, well, we know that your adult children, did this because you created trauma with them, and maybe it's time that you confess that. I'm like, how do you know that? Do you realize how self-righteous that is?
yeah,
Would you go talk to a cancer patient like, hey, I know the reason why you got cancer is because you messed up 5 years ago? I mean, anyway,
yeah.
that's all I meant by that.
Well, it's interesting because you
Hmm.
see that among them, and certainly I've received that. I know plenty of creators that
Hmm.
I know have received that, and they
Hmm.
don't know the story, they don't know you. Um, at the same time, they also have examples of people they follow who are either therapists or self-proclaimed life coaches or what have you, who are
Hmm.
doing that too in spades. In fact, there's one right now there's a group that's in the middle of a brouhaha right now over one creator who really went after a ton of estranged parents who really just, without knowing them, annihilated them and made assumptions and really put them in a bad light as examples, using them to create the episode. And so now the strange moms have kicked back and said, "You don't know me. You're making these assumptions. You're telling all these, strange adult kids that this is what we did. That's not my scenario at all." And
Yeah.
they came at her hard. Now she's turned around, they made a video that now she's the victim. Did anybody realize when they made those videos that she would be affected? So now she's the victim. And
Okay,
that's
yeah, that's very borderliney.
isn't that classic? Right?
Borderline. We found a
you,
borderline. Right.
you may want to
So,
treat her.
oh man, I love it. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
And this
No.
is after she accused one creator
Uh,
of being an alcoholic and a drug user online. And the woman doesn't even drink and has never touched a drug in her life. And that was really a bad thing to do, obviously, because that's, puts you in legal
Yeah.
territory,
Huh.
right? But it's getting
Yeah.
to that point right now. So
Yeah.
I think that, like you said,
Hmm.
I think there's got to be a lot more. I think this whole area right now is spinning out of control online.
1,000%. It
Yeah,
is.
it's
Yeah.
really just, it went from being something where people were trying to help and get voices out to just like a
Hmm.
collision of atoms, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so important that maybe should be a lot more, not say a little bit, a lot more grace, a lot more understanding.
Hmm.
People are human.
100%. Yeah.
And I mean, I think that that's the only way that we can actually bring some resolution to this. You said to me in the last video, because I remember everything, you said to me that you had hope for the future and you had hope
Hmm.
for families and you had hope for this situation, the estrangement situation, because you feel that, those that are parents who are, let's put it this way, more people who fear God or have God in their lives are still having children, and there's the other ones, the other side of it maybe are not, and so you could see where, look, it's a reality. If if you believe in God or you have a faith-filled outlook and you're still having children, that lineage is going to continue.
Yeah.
And so you could probably put it more clearly than I just did. But
Hmm.
but I wonder, on the one hand, I want to believe that. And yet, on the other hand, I'm looking at this whole thing escalating and, the chaos and the divide getting louder.
Hmm.
So tell me what your thoughts are with regards to all that, because I can see it
Yeah.
really. The world is right now in chaos, and this is no exception, this whole area.
Yeah.
Mental health
Yeah,
is
I know. It really it's a big question too, because I mean, I do think we have to take a little bit of an honest assessment about maybe the way we parented has been overly protective, and maybe we've applied way too much safetyism, which also hasn't helped a lot of our kids. Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, has talked a lot about that. He's talked about, so my uncle back in the 60s, he went to Vietnam, and he talked about somebody that's experienced, he was a medic, talk about trauma. My
yeah,
goodness. And he carried that for like 40 years. So my uncle had a lot of tolerance, but there was no awareness
right.
because we didn't really know what we were dealing. When after he got out of his service, they were just like, okay, go back to work. And that's what he did. And
Mm,
then my aunt got in a car wreck, and she was never the same again. She lost a lot of blood, changed her personality, stayed in that marriage, did everything he could and they're still married to this day. Talked to my uncle. I mean, a lot of tolerance way up here, but just became aware of his symptoms like 40 years later. The reason why I bring that up is because now it's switched. It's way over here. We've got
mm,
basically no tolerance for
mm,
stressors, but we've got this over excessive amount of awareness. And I
right.
think what needs to be happening is kind of like this. We need to start bringing balance, because at the end of the day, there really isn't evidence that avoiding things is good for you. There's no evidence that telling people that there's a trigger warning that's good for kids. There's
Right.
a significant amount of psychological evidence that says distress tolerance, doing things that are uncomfortable, is really, really good for your anxiety at the end of the day. And
Mm-hmm.
so once I think we kind of bring that balance with the things that we're seeing with awareness,
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping we'll start to kind of be more educated there. Um, it's kind of like the Me Too movement, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like in the beginning, I loved what Rachel Dollinger was saying. We went to see her, and she brought a lot of awareness with sexual exploitation. But then there was like, okay, wait, believe all women? Wait a second. I know a lot, like, no.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the majority of white women actually were responsible for lynching black people. People often forget that. To Kill a
Yeah.
Mockingbird is a true story
Mhm.
that she wrote about in the South, that here's Tom and he's falsely accused by a white woman who gets embarrassed about her coming on to him. That
Mm.
happened a lot. So no, there's a lot of women you do not believe. And
Right.
yet we're starting to get a little bit of balance that, hey, eyewitness testimony, one, is not always the most accurate.
Right.
That's psychology 101. I teach that class at Endicott. It's one of my most controversial classes
Mm.
because I teach memory is not a video recording. Memory is it could very much be influenced by therapy, emotion.
Mhm.
That's why DNA evidence has let a lot of people off that were wrongfully accused. So you
Right.
take even that one movement, I'm hoping, you'll get a little bit of balance here. So what I'm hoping is, like, as we move forward, we have to start teaching our kids to be uncomfortable. We have to
Mm.
teach our kids to take risks. We have to start teaching kids to be more assertive,
Mhm.
and also, like, I think moving forward, um, we as parents, I think we have to kind of readjust that we can't necessarily expect that we're always going to have a relationship with them for the rest of our lives. And I think that's okay to let go of a little bit because, you know
Wait a
what I
second.
mean?
Wait a second. Okay.
Yeah.
I said that
Yeah.
in a video, and that was such a controversial video, and
Yeah.
people were
I hear
coming at
that.
me.
Yeah.
But the way I look at it is you give birth to your children, you love them, you raise
Yeah.
them,
Sure.
but not every child, and as hard as that is for especially for parents to hear, not every
Mm.
child is meant to be in your life forever, or they're going to
Yeah.
be periods where they're not going to be in your life,
Sure.
or they're going to circle back. That people were so angry that I said that. So now
Good
you
for you.
explain that.
Glad you said it. But what you just did, what you just applied is Albert Ellis CBT. So good for you. You actually applied really, really good therapy. So I'm proud of you. So
I didn't even
because
know.
because
This
what
didn't make sense.
Albert Ellis said, one of the biggest things and why a lot of people suffer in his office is that they have these expectations that actually aren't the way life works. So I'll take a different case. I have people that have come to see me. I believe for 40 years that if you work really hard and you retire, life's going to be easy. And now they're in my office, high blood pressure, going to the doctor 5 times a week, and talk about real adjustment. And what we're doing is that we had to chip away at that. I don't want to call it a fantasy, but it was like the false cause fallacy.
Right,
If I work hard, life's going to be great. No, who told you that? I
right,
don't know who told you that, but that's actually not the right message. And I
right.
think I'm not, I love my 3 kids so much. I would die for them. But I
Sure.
have to even tell myself when they're adults, they're adults. I can't make the assumption that I'm demanded that I have to be in their lives. I
Right.
hope I am. And I need to understand that that's just, so we used to have a thing called this is called rite of passage. We don't have that in our culture anymore.
Hmm.
Native Americans understood this. Jews understand this. African countries understand this. What Native Americans used to do, they would take their 13-year-old boys and they would put them 15 miles away, and they said, okay, you have to find your way back.
Hmm.
Only about 85% came back. It killed the part of the parent that wanted to go in and rescue the boy, but it also taught the boy not to overly depend on the parent. And when they came back, they shook their hands and they said, okay, now you're a man. We don't have that in our culture at
Yeah.
all. And it's actually done a huge disservice to us
Yeah, I believe that.
because we want to parent them and parent them and parent them and parent them. And we don't understand that at the end of the day, we have to push them into this very dangerous world. And I think what needs to kind of happen, because I do think eventually we're going to get into a phase, I believe 30 years from now, this is just me, I could be wrong. We're going to have a much more religious society because we have to look at who's having children.
Right. That's what you were saying to
And
me.
we can't, like, the leftists are not having kids. They're going to die
Right.
off. See you
Right.
later. Bye.
Right.
You're gone.
Yeah.
If you don't have kids, you're on the evolution map. You're gone. And
Yeah.
so you have to look at who's having kids. So look at 50 years from now. So that's why we're going to be in a more religious society. I don't know if that's good.
Mm.
I don't know, right? Because the
Yeah.
problem with that is that you can get much more dogmatic about stuff.
Right.
And so anyway, I know I'm going too far on this. So that's just a
No,
prediction, but
it's just a
I
great
I
conversation.
think, this is what I think about all day. So it's like so I do think that the lack of a rite of passage has not helped us.
Right.
And way back in the 80s, when we started seeing kids missing on milk cartons,
Yeah.
what started happening? Parents started becoming overly protective, especially in white culture,
Right.
because this is really happening in more white culture, a lot more so than Black families, Jewish families, Iranian families, Middle Eastern families. Doesn't really happen in those families. Little
Yeah.
bit in Black
Yeah.
families
Hmm.
recently, but not
Hmm.
much.
Hmm.
And white culture does tend to overprotect. And I think what we need to do is bring the awareness and the tolerance at equal level, so we know how to be like really keep pushing, be okay with uncomfort. And
I
that's going
think,
to help.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that that is spot on. I think it is
Hmm.
spot on because I
Hmm.
see it. I see it around me. It's interesting because I just recently read an article about how helicopter parenting has destroyed our society in many ways because the
Hmm.
parents are not pushing their kids out. They're just keeping them
Hmm.
there. And that's where someone had said to me, so what do you think of this? I said, well, that's the same thing as I was saying about that whole period where they have an extra 10 years to live in your home and not get pushed out of the nest because they're
Hmm.
emerging adults. We went from, when I was growing up, you were a kid, you were a baby, you were a elementary school kid, you were a middle school kid, you were a high school kid, and then you were either going to college or you were getting a job. And after
Yeah.
18, if you didn't have a direction you were going, then you better tell your parents what you plan to do because by 22 you were out of the nest
Yeah.
and you had to go pay your own bill, so figure it out. And I think then you get that extra 10 years where now they're in their 30s and are not leaving the nest yet. And I think we did society a disservice because we told
100%.
them to
Yeah.
stick around for another 10 years and they don't know what they're doing with themselves in those 10 years. And so they have all that time in their hands to blame society and blame everybody else. We didn't have that time. We had to get out. We had to get a job,
Yeah. Right.
and
Right.
that really just did. I remember I was attending a service one time, a friend's church, Catholic church, and I remember I could not believe this priest. He came out and he said, stop helicopter parenting your kids. He goes,
Nice. I like this
and
guy.
he was like this tough Catholic priest. He said,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
gotta stop. He went up and down the aisles. He goes, you got to stop helicopter parenting your kids. You're making these kids they can't survive out there. That's not your job. And,
Well,
and
and
I,
also they are and they're not. This is what's interesting. This is Height's point. We're overprotected in the physical world. I mean, when my kids fall at the local park, it's like falling on pillows, right? Have you
right.
seen the local parks? I mean, come on,
Yeah.
you're not going to get hurt. When was the last time you and I saw a kid in a cast? We just see them all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 49, I'm 50 this year. I grew up in the 80s and I got casts all over the place. When was
Right.
the last time you and I saw a kid with a cast? It's been years. So we're overprotecting our kids in the physical world, but we're underprotecting them in the virtual world.
That's
And
what,
it
yeah.
actually needs to be switched.
Yeah.
That's why they're overly anxious. So Haidt
Yeah.
wrote a recent book, The Anxious Generation. Anxiety leads to neuroticism. Neuroticism leads to some type of binary view of the world, and then villain, and you get where I'm going with that. So it's like that's not a good cycle there,
No.
because you actually want to overprotect in the virtual world, because when you don't, you rob them of childhood, you rob them of seeing the here and now, you rob them of assertiveness, you rob them of face-to-face contact.
Yeah.
um and then when you push them in the physical world, you teach them confidence, and this is Piaget's point and Eric Erickson, where the way we learn is through reflexivity, it's through movement, it's through touch, and
Right.
then eventually we start to take initiative, and then after that we start to work on our identity. And
Right.
if we don't, we have shame and doubt, and then we have identity confusion or diverse, so I just it really kind of I do think there's a lot of connections here that I think, because I think now what we want to do is that we want to reflect. We don't want we don't want to shame ourselves.
Right.
If anything, if anything that a parents may need to apologize for, it's maybe telling their kids you gave them too much, not too little, which is a
Yeah.
great reframe, honestly,
Yeah.
because it's like they want to keep playing victim. It's like, no, I actually didn't let you be a victim.
Right.
And you even cutting me off and acting like you are is kind of the problem because you don't really know how freaking life works.
Right.
And I need you to make some sacrifices here.
Right.
Um, that's how I was able to forgive my father.
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't perfect. He made a lot of mistakes. And then I started toying around with the world and realizing, wow, I have just as many problems if I keep going down this road. And
Right.
so, you know, and that's life. And that's just I can't hold on to bitterness. He did the best he could with the resources that he had.
Right.
And it's like, you know, I love my dad now. It wasn't an easy person to forgive, but I love him. He's 82 and he's on his end road. I'm proud of him. He's taken amends, and I'm also glad that I have a great relationship with him. So, I mean, it's just like, yeah, it's that all comes from working with life. Anyway.
Right.
So
Well,
with that.
being open to the
Mm,
frailties of beings and, and the realities of just
mm,
living. All right. I mean, I think that's,
yeah.
people are not perfect,
Mm,
and not people are so easily sit in judgment. I find
mm,
that there's a lot of judges and juries out there.
mm,
And I think what life teaches you as you get older is, there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of gray in these situations. And I think you have to give some space for that gray because, you can't judge people too hard. You don't know the shoes they were walking in at the
mm,
time, you know?
mm,
And I just feel like that's why I had a little bit of a rant yesterday. I was doing a video because I saw a video. One woman was saying, your mothers you were unable to give you love. They grew up in ages where they were unable to give you love. They were unable to hear you. They were unable to this, and this is why you're all here. And Peter, maybe that is true of some of the parents in the past, right? Maybe that was true of some of the boomers and the baby boomers and every generation prior. But
mm,
not all of them. People didn't all of a sudden turn on a flashlight today and say, "Oh, look at me! I have a heart. I can love you." It wasn't as if parents didn't love their children. It wasn't as if parents wouldn't sit down and have conversations with their children. But
yeah.
that wasn't only their focal point. They needed to make sure that these kids just could survive. They may have been more heavy-handed in giving them the opportunity to try things and fail. They,
Mm,
and that doesn't mean that they weren't capable of being good parents. And I
right.
see so much of that today where they
Mm,
constantly drill into these adult children, um, or offspring, whichever you want to call them, that yeah, they were somehow broken. Parents of the past were broken, and yes, they were all. Everyone came with their weaknesses, but they weren't like the last how many generations didn't somehow when they hit the pavement together break and then go on to raise kids. That's not how things
mm,
work.
yeah. Well, it's also such a self-righteous view of the past too. It really is. And it comes from a place of, and this is why Carl Jung really wanted the young to know their shadow. I think we
Yeah,
often forget this. Jung wrote about the shadow right after World War II because it was all the youth that were okay with putting the Jews in ovens and
right,
getting Russia and turning Russia communist and letting 80 million people die of starvation. That was the youth. We often forget
right,
that.
right,
So how did that happen? And
right.
Jung would say they're not aware of their shadow. One of my favorite passages in the book of John is when Jesus comes to this adulterous woman and he was like, okay, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. And I
Right,
love right after it says, those who are the oldest walked away,
right,
and then the youth followed. So what does
right.
that say? We who
Yeah,
are older, it's like, yeah, we've all made mistakes. So who am I to
yeah,
judge? Why can I cast this to her? I'm sure
right,
this guy who was about to do it, he was like, wait, I just passed the prostitute down the other, and I kind of met with her the other day. Or the other guy that was about to cast it, he was like, oh wait, yeah, I forgot that I did a few things. And they drop it. The
Right.
youth don't understand that the darkness inside of them, and that's
Yeah.
Jung's point. Jung would say that's also your greatest strength, but a lot of the youth are naive to it, which is why they get caught
Yeah.
up in movements
Yeah.
that are really not good for them. Is
Right.
because if you're not aware of your shadow, you don't forgive, and if you're
Right.
not aware of your shadow, you also get taken advantage of.
Right.
And so,
Oh,
I
100%.
100%. I mean, the reason why I like borderlines, I see the same shit inside me. I'm like,
Right.
I know what you're doing. I think that's why it's like, girl, I've been there. I know exactly how you're playing it because I know the shadow. I know my own
Right.
shadow,
Right.
right? I mean, I've
Yeah.
been like, and I've kind of alluded to that in the session. I know where I've been. I've gone, and I could sit with that and go real. Okay, I know without God's grace what I have the capacity toward,
Right.
or without community, or without my wife, or without friends. Yeah, I've been there. I've just sat with it. I wanted
Right.
to run away from it, but I just kind of sat with it. And
Right.
then it just kind of like, okay, all right, I'm forgiven. And also I just know myself. I think
Right.
that's so healthy because
I think so.
then, it's a great way to just, it's very freeing really, because you don't have to bullshit anymore. And so, yeah, I'm sitting with a borderline and I'm like, girl, I know what you're doing. I could do it. I could do it myself. And that's so funny because my borderlines, they sense the lack of judgment. They're like, oh, he's not judging me. I'm like, no, but I'm calling you out because I mean,
Right.
that's AA right there.
Right.
Or whatever. Any
Right.
addiction group, it's like that's why it's good to have those friends. They're like, come on, you're minimizing. You're doing this so you could go off and you can get drunk and then
Right.
act like you're a victim. And then the next day you could do the crocodile tears. I know
Right.
exactly what you're doing. So
Right.
anyway, my whole point is, I hope I'm not getting off a tangent, but I mean, I
No.
think the youth really, what we want to do for them is to, that comes from improvisation in the world, though. They have to make mistakes.
Yeah.
They have to fail. They have to keep falling over and over again. And we should
Right.
really be encouraging that.
Yeah.
And
I
so that
agree with
we,
you.
anyway, so yeah.
But Young is interesting to me. I
Mm,
love his work. I agree with so much of his work. I recently
mm,
read, with regards to his work, that he believes, or he believes that the shadow, people transpose Satan onto the shadow. So, in other words, the shadow, everything gets blamed on Satan. And when it's really
mm,
the shadow that is Satan. It's a really interesting concept. And the reason why Satan came into being is for control. Like the church went to use Satan as control, and call it, when it's really, we're the one that caused the evil. It isn't Satan who just came in. We're the ones who caused the evil. And I thought it was like an you know, interesting twist on Satan.
mm.
Um, yeah, I recently read that in some of his work. And I was
That's
surprised by that.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
no, that is
it
very,
really
very
isn't
fascinating.
Satan per se. Satan is the shadow of ourselves,
Mm,
and that
mm.
the church used Satan to control the masses. So if you did this, Satan, has control of you, and so the church can save you. You have to do this, this, and this was the theory.
Wow. Yeah, sure. Fascinating.
Isn't that interesting?
That is very interesting. Well,
And
even
then,
like speaking of the Catholic Church, like when they got into the whole sex stuff, and when you talk to people who take advantage of children, they would even tell you the children that they took advantage of are the ones that were totally naive. They weren't aware of their shadow. They stayed
right,
away from the tough kids from the inner cities that like really kind of saw evil. They were
right,
overly nice to them,
right,
but they took advantage of the kids that were just like just kind of saw the world in black and white terms. And it's very easy to manipulate those children. It's also very easily, and I think that's the other thing too, it's very easy to get manipulated by social justice movements and communism and all this other stuff, and to think that's a great thing, mainly because they're movements that are built on a very binary view of the world. And when you see the
right,
world in binary terms, you're not very intelligent
right,
emotionally. You
right,
might be smart, you might pass school, but you don't get it. because the relationships are not binary. Relationships are highly complex.
Right.
And it's just like it is diverse, and it's not just about dad being bad or mom being evil. It's
Right.
like, no, it's like there's a story to this, and there's tons of gray and complexity, and you're part of that story. And are
Right.
you really wanting to just cut yourself off from that story and make yourself completely, as if you would have done it better? Now you don't even understand yourself, and it's just kind of like,
And
anyway,
you perpetuate it. You perpet
and you
that's where,
perpetuate it.
yeah, that's where the
Yeah.
continuation of it happens, because you're doing
Mm.
the opposite, like you said in another one of your videos. You're doing the
Yeah.
opposite, but you might be doing that, but that's not good either. You have
Right.
to.
No, it's not. Right.
There's,
Yeah.
so you're perpetuating the estrangement to continue, and Carl Pilmer said it too. It's gonna zap 7 generations. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's interesting, but it's interesting also the binary view of things, because I have to tell you, recently I had seen I don't want to get into the politics of this, but there's an element of this that I have to address, because it feeds into this part. So I had recently seen an interview that Gavin Newsom gave with Anderson Cooper, and he had just written this book, and he was telling a story about him and his mother, right? So his father had been an absentee father for most of his life, and his mother raised him and his sister. And apparently there was a lot of what he would even term, he was self-absorbed, he was self-centered, he was angry, he was this and that, and he was not there for him. And his mother eventually had cancer, and she was dying, and she decided to do assisted suicide. And so and she had planned for it, and now her sister, the daughter, knowing that this was going to happen on a Thursday, an upcoming Thursday, and she left a voicemail on Gavin Newsom's cell phone. Said, "I just want you to know that I'm going to basically off myself, right, with assisted suicide on Thursday. So if you want to see me before that happens, you have to come visit me before." And when he got this voicemail, he had been so absentee that when he got this voicemail, he had no idea what was going on. So he calls his sister, and he says, "What is going on?" He goes, "What's wrong with you?" He goes, "What?" She goes, "What's wrong with you? Mom's been in a lot of pain, and you haven't been around." So he realized then so much, and he went, and he ended up going, see his mom, and was there when she had the assisted suicide. And he sort of looked, and it's sort of the way the story portrayed the story is, he realized he had been he said, "Yeah, as a son, I was not the son I should have been to her, that I was not proud of myself and a son I'd been to her." Right? So it's a real, if you want to say, come to Jesus moment in a man's life, right? So, and I looked at that, and I looked at the honesty of this, and I looked at the vulnerability of this, and then and I said to myself, you can like him, you can hate him, you can be a Democrat, you can be a Republican, you could be an independent, whatnot, right? But you can't not look at this story, and can't not look at the honesty of this man, and not relate, and somehow now understand. Party aside, there's so much people can learn in that story, right? There's
I like that.
And you can. He set it out there, and he really called himself out. And I have to say, now, do you know, in this very polarized world, how many, I got comments underneath, because I wrote an article on this. The comments I got underneath that article, how and just to see how what a narcissist he is, or see such negativity from And I said to myself, guys, this is the problem with the world.
Yeah.
We're not seeing each other. Forget party. You don't have to look at it as party. Look at the man.
Right. Yeah.
Didn't we all do things, maybe not to that extreme, but didn't we all do things that we're not proud of? That you expose that on this man, that he did something he wasn't proud of, but he had the courage to stand up to
Truly
it.
submit it. Yeah, sure. You could definitely say that. Yeah, I know. It's really unfortunate when you look at that. And it's like you can never ever say anything good about the other part side. It's just like you could say lots of good about the other side. You know, I mean, 100% at times. And it's like, you know, well, even a clock is right 2 times out of the day, right? So maybe so you can, maybe that could be, if you're that polarized, could you at least admit that maybe this is the one time he's right in the day? So that's fine. You could admit that.
Yeah.
So
right. So it's just interesting how, you know, and it goes back to the whole thing too, that, you know, you can never be wrong. People can never be wrong. A parent can never be wrong. A child can never be wrong. Of course they can. Parents, no children can be wrong. No parent is surprised when a child is wrong, you know, but they are surprised when all of a sudden they pick up and leave you because they said you were wrong. And, you know, and you never even told them, told them that, hey, something was wrong. Or you never even brought it up in a conversation. Hey, can we talk about this? This didn't work for me, or something like that. That's when, you know, that's where all the hurt comes in. It's not, Mom, you were wrong. Dad, you were wrong. Well, maybe I wasn't wrong actually at the time that I did it, but you're not caught up yet enough to understand I wasn't wrong, or maybe I was wrong. You know, like those things can be right. Both of those, you know, that could be right. You know, so I think. You know,
well, you're applying good DBT right there too. It's like 2 things can be true at once. I don't like his political views, and what he said was actually wonderful. Or, you know, so it's like, I know that's good DBT, and I think that's actually how we're going to get out of a lot of this. Is polarization needs to have 2 things being true, and that's you know, there's a lot of similarities here. I mean, personality disorders isn't just living in the left; it definitely lives everywhere. So, you know, I mean, I'm working. You know, I'd love to one day get this book published, but I'm working on narcissism in the conservative side of the church. You know, I've met a lot of men when I went to seminary, when I got my MDiv, who use their own grandiose themes. This is God's word. And anybody questions me, you're kind of like, you're the servant of the devil. And it's like, wait, what? Well, what you're saying is not in line with scripture. And then their ego gets fragile and they get mad. And then, you know, anyway. So, I mean, this is PD does not have political views. So it's like, it lives everywhere. You know,
it absolutely,
like,
it absolutely does. It absolutely. Okay, so we're going to end it there. You're going to come back again. Stick around, though, because I want to talk to you about something after the broadcast. Okay, if you have 2 minutes.
Okay, sure.
Okay, and then so I'm going to let him go. He's going to be back again. All right, I'll put all the links to what he, you know, to the things that he's doing down below, and I'm going to see you in a minute, Peter. All righty, so there you go. We are done. I have to usually round this up around 1 hour. So hopefully you enjoyed the broadcast. Here is my book. It's on Amazon. Go get it if you like. You'll learn something. Here is the app. It's free. We've made it free, completely free. You can go sign up for it and meet people in your area that are strange, so that you can have coffee and launch social groups and what have you. There you go. Okay, I'm going to leave it at there. Thank you for joining us. See you next week. I have another great guest. She's going to hit this from another angle. She's someone involved in the education of our children, and she's going to share what she sees in the schools. So I look forward to chatting with all of you again next week.